Your profession?
I'm a potter.
And you, Acadian, what is your profession?
Sculptor, sir.
And you?
Blacksmith.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Alright, so this week is Greek black metal. And like a lot of metal scenes, you know, you got like the big four of thrash metal with Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, and Metallica. You got the big four of German thrash metal with Tankard, Destruction, Creator, and Sodom. You have a big three of major bands that started the Greek black metal scene. Of course, there were other important bands in the death metal scene, like Nightfall and Septic Flesh, both of whom sort of blended the lines between death metal and black metal, but I think most people will agree that when it comes to Greek black metal, you're talking about the scene that started specifically by Necromantia, Varathron, and Rotting Christ.
Now that's edgy as fuck!
So we'll start out with the oldest band of the bunch, Varathron, which as far as I can tell means extremely deep gorge in Greek. Hey, I plumbed the depths of a very deep gorge last night. It was called Yamada. Well, special thanks to our New Jersey correspondent for his valuable input on that front. But anyways, Varathron is the oldest Greek black metal band as far as I can tell. They started out in 1988. And they're probably the one that's hardest to get a handle on describing their actual style, but at the same time, they embody that style in a way. Since their sound is so diverse, they came up with a lot of the tropes that were then expounded upon by the larger Hellenic black metal movement. So rather than taking their cues from the Scandinavian bands like Bathory or the more Central European bands like Celtic Frost, they started out with a base of classic heavy metal and also a little bit of stuff like Slayer, and it ends up sounding like this. So one of the things that really characterizes Hellenic black metal versus other styles is a pretty heavy emphasis on dynamics in their music. So you get soft, spooky intros like this one, and also there's a lot of classically influenced lead guitar, which of course leads us into, so there's that heavy old school metal influence and how melodic it is, but they've taken it into darker, sinister, and more complex places. This one's called Le Renoir, and it's from one of their late 80s demos. This is really early modern black metal stuff, and it's probably my favorite song by them. So now we're going to get a little bit more of the thrash metal. So it's melodic, but it's also very sinister, befitting of a band named after an epic chasm, a pit of hell out of which demons crawl to torment the complacent hordes of mankind. So, Varathron, really good stuff. And actually, out of the big three of the Greek black metal stuff, they're the one that's still releasing material that I would say is of the highest caliber. So moving on, like I said, it's hard to get a handle on Varathron, hard to describe their sounds, so complex and multifaceted. It's hard to get a grip on everything that they're doing. But moving on, we have a band that's easier to describe. We have Necromantia, who are famous for, instead of using guitars, they have an 8-string bass player and then a regular bass player, which gives them a very bass-heavy sound. And like Varathron, they're big into song dynamics, and their songs tend to be a bit longer, but they also have a lot of varied shades to them, which keeps them interesting. So let's have a listen to something off of their third album. This one's called Ancient Pride. I should have mentioned earlier, they're also notable for using a lot of keyboards and other instruments besides the regular metal instrumentation. Like, they'll pull out a saxophone every once in a while, all kinds of weird stuff. But yeah, they've got an even heavier influence from old school power metal. There's a lot of Manowar in here, even though it's still black metal. But we're going to get to a dynamic shift right around now. So you can hear how they use bass as a lead melodic instrument. Very passionate vocals. So yeah, not Varathron, Necromantia. Shit! Necromantia, great band. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, they're not releasing anything more, which sucks because they were one of the pillars of the scene. The main guys, Necromantia, actually were in communication with a lot of the Norwegian black metal guys, and you could see them mentioned in the thank you lists on various Dark Throne albums and such. But the cool thing about the Ancient Pride album is that it follows a similar ideological arc to a lot of black metal, where it started out very satanic and dark and evil, and then moved on to recognize a sense of European identity and get into a bit of paganism and right-wing politics. However, journalists from outlets such as Chronicles of Chaos and Metal Hammer were not terribly happy about that at the time. Chronicles of Chaos is notable for featuring Adrian Bromley, who everyone in the metal scene was very upset when he died, even though anyone could have seen it coming since he was a fat piece of shit that didn't take care of himself. So let's read a little bit of what these fat mongrels had to say about the excellent Ancient Pride album.
It seems a bit odd that a Tindy-sounding drum machine is featured on this mini CD, since the EP is being marketed as some sort of tribute to down-home ancient European ways. In fact, I was a bit startled by the overall character of this whole release, which feels like a real step backwards from 1995's excellent Scarlet Evil Witching Black. Gone are the innovations and occult atmospheres that made that album so interesting. In their place, we get a flute, lots of mid-paced riffing on shrill-sounding songs, plus a bunch of extremely uncool symbolism and rhetoric about the European consciousness. European consciousness? My ass.
Note added, 4/23/97.
This remark was not meant as a sweeping insult to all of European pagan and heathen, but as an expression of my strong dislike for the fascistic connotations of some of the ideas and imagery on this release, man.
So yeah, the normies weren't a big fan of that one, even though I think Ancient Pride might be their best album. A lot of people let the fascist aesthetics of it color their enjoyment of the compositions themselves, which were probably Necromantia's best. Necromantia had a tendency to get a bit unfocused, especially compared to Varathron, where they'd have like a 13-minute long song, but a third of it would be weird spooky ghost noises and like a saxophone. Doesn't happen on the Ancient Pride release, but regardless, all of the Necromantia albums are classics, especially their first three, including Ancient Pride. So now we get to my favorite band of the three. I'm not going to say they're the best. I think Varathron might have slightly more complex songwriting prowess, but Rodenkreis are definitely the catchiest, and they write the most memorable stuff. And it makes sense that they're the most popular of the old Greek black metal. So let's have a listen to something off of their second and best album. This one's called Non Serviam. So, pretty good integration of keyboards into an overall melodic black metal sound. And these guys are definitely the most melodic of the old Greek bands. Probably why I like them so much, because I'm a melody fag. Listen to this one at the gym a lot too. But watch how they're going to use lead guitar here to introduce the next set of riffs. So normally that would just be a solo, but that's kind of like a melody in its own right. And everything's moving through that matrix of chugging guitars. So definitely interesting songwriting going on here. Moon Sorrow covered this as a bonus track on their latest album. I would also highly recommend their cover of this song. But yeah, Rotting Christ, heavily influential on the overall melodic black metal scene. In fact, on the old Dissection albums and the band photos, you can see them all wearing Rotting Christ shirts. So you can see the Meds influencing the Nords, which a lot of people don't really want to talk about in black metal, but it happened. But I like Rotting Christ so fucking much that we're actually going to listen to more of it, because fuck you, this is the third track off their first album. It's called Figment Thy Gift. I don't know, some wacky demonic phrase, but check out this one where they sort of have a very narratively structured solo section leading into a thrash break that also happens to be very melodic in addition to being brutal. So the solo here, like all good solos in black metal, instead of it just being an opportunity for the guitarist to show off, it moves forward. But the rest of the song, it provides a melodic counterpoint to the riffs that are going on underneath. It sort of porpoises above and below the level of the main riffs, providing its own commentary. But it still shreds, so it does everything a solo is supposed to do. Here we get to the break. So yeah, that obviously is pretty fucking good stuff. And you can see them doing this thing where they have a melody going, but they still palm mute it. That's kind of a main characteristic of Hellenic black metal that you don't hear in much metal outside of the scene, although it did influence some later stuff. And then a nice counterpoint to that melodic breakdown. Some good spooky whispering going on too. So this is kind of like the song taking a break, but as that extra harmony is introduced, we're also building up to another explosion of energy that you're about to hear. Those are some tortured vocals. So yeah, Rotting Christ, really good band. Unfortunately, their later stuff after like the fourth or fifth album doesn't really do it for me. But especially those first two Rotting Christ albums, that's like some of my favorite black metal of all time. I still listen to it, got into it in high school, and it's still in constant rotation. But the interesting thing about Greek black metal, as hinted to earlier by that Necromantia track, is that it has something of a political history. You had that Necromantia EP, you also had Legion of Doom, who were one of the first openly Natsok black metal bands, and you have Varathron, who are one of the great Greek black metal bands that come out in the second wave of it after Rotting Christ, Varathron, and Necromantia blazed the way. The cool thing about them is that the main guy behind the band, black metal name Kaiados, real life name Georgios Germenis, is heavily involved in Golden Dawn nowadays. There's plenty of pictures of this guy online, you know, in the Greek parliament in a suit, arguing passionately for the welfare of his people. And I kind of like to juxtapose those next to pictures of him in the corpse paint. But, you know, if you know a lot about black metal, there's not too much of a transition from this to something sounding a little bit more like this. So yeah, Greek black metal is a major force on the world stage. Sorry, posers, but there's a lot of great bands besides the one I mentioned. You know, we got like Septic Flesh, you got fucking On Thorns I Lay, Kawir, Agatus, and Zemiel, who I've actually covered on this show before. Those two sister, or rather brother bands are putting out some of the best metal material nowadays. So yeah, if you get a chance, don't just hang out up north with the Norwegians. You know, take a little trip south to the sunny Mediterranean. Get yourself some Hellenic black metal.
Threaten my people with slavery and death.
This is madness!
Madness. This is Sparta!